There comes a moment in every driven soul's life when success stops being a goal and becomes a hunger. It starts small, almost noble. You tell yourself you just want to be better, sharper, faster, stronger. But soon, the mirror you once used to check progress becomes a battlefield of self-doubt. You no longer chase dreams, you chase validation. Every win feels fleeting. Every milestone dissolves before you can even breathe it in. And deep down, you start to sense it, the haunting truth that maybe you're not chasing success anymore. You're running from the fear of being ordinary. It's a quiet destruction, masked as discipline. You wake up earlier, work longer, smile less. People praise your grind, they call you focused. But if they could see inside your mind, they'd see the chaos, the anxiety that if you slow down for even a second, someone else will take your place. You tell yourself this is what greatness requires. But tell me, what kind of greatness steals your peace and replaces it with paranoia? You've built walls of achievements, yet you feel trapped inside them. We often think motivation is the fire that keeps us alive. But what if it's the fire that's burning us from within? The Sigma mindset teaches control, not chaos. It's about mastering the will, not becoming a slave to it. Yet too many fall into the silent trap, mistaking overdrive for purpose. You stop hearing your inner voice because the noise of ambition grows too loud. And by the time you notice the emptiness, success has already become your addiction. The saddest part? The world celebrates your downfall as determination. They clap while you crumble. They post your grind as inspiration, unaware that behind the filtered success lies a mind gasping for stillness. You smile for photos, but your soul is tired, not from failure, but from never feeling enough. That's the real dark side of motivation. It convinces you that rest is weakness, and that peace is for the unambitious. But here's the twist. What if peace isn't the opposite of success, but its foundation? What if the truly powerful don't chase the storm? They control it. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into this hidden war, how ambition, when left unchecked, turns from a weapon into a wound. Because sometimes the price of chasing everything is losing yourself completely. 1. When success becomes an obsession, the illusion of progress. There comes a point in every man's life, that quiet, unnoticed turning point, when the thing he once loved starts to consume him. At first, ambition feels like a gift. It gives direction, power, purpose. You wake up hungry for progress, measuring each day in tasks completed and goals achieved. But slowly, quietly, without warning, the hunger begins to eat you from inside. What once felt like a fire guiding your path now feels like a blaze you can't control. You start to measure your worth not by who you are, but by what you've achieved. You stop feeling proud of progress and start fearing the pause. You scroll through success stories, not for inspiration anymore, but to feed your growing anxiety that maybe you're not doing enough. You begin to equate stillness with failure. And in that moment, you don't realize it, but success has already stopped being your ally. It's become your master. It begins innocently. You say yes to every opportunity. You sacrifice sleep, relationships, laughter, because you're chasing something bigger. You call it focus, but it's really fear wearing a disciplined mask. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being irrelevant. Fear of not living up to the image you built. You tell yourself it's just temporary, that you'll rest when you make it. But that finish line keeps moving, always just one more project, one more deal, one more milestone away. You celebrate achievements, but only for seconds before the void whispers again, "What's next?" You start mistaking exhaustion for progress. You confuse busyness with growth. You drown in the applause of others while your own voice fades into silence. And deep down, a realization starts to form. You're not chasing success anymore. You're running from the terror of standing still. Success at its purest is meant to free you. But when obsession takes over, it enslaves you to an invisible race that never ends. The irony? From the outside, you look unstoppable, admired, even envied. People repost your quotes, your photos, your victories. They say you're winning, but they don't see the price you pay. The nights where you stare at the ceiling, unable to sleep because your mind is calculating every possible failure. The mornings where you wake up already behind. The quiet loneliness that creeps in when you realize no one really knows you anymore. Not even you. You become the brand, the title, the image. You stop being a person and became a performance. You build an empire of accomplishments. But inside, you feel like rubble. We often think motivation is a light that guides us, but sometimes it's a flame that blinds us. You start telling yourself this pain is part of the journey. You believe suffering makes you stronger. But not all suffering leads to growth. Some just erases who you were before. The Sigma mindset, the one that preaches discipline, detachment, power, wasn't built to destroy peace. It was built to control desire. But when that mindset is twisted by insecurity, it becomes poison. You start thinking that the more you push, the more you matter. You stop realizing that power isn't about motion. It's about direction. What good is a car that runs endlessly but never knows where it's going? That's what most people become, engines without purpose, chasing validation disguised as ambition. And that's the painful truth. Most people don't burn out because they're weak. They burn out because they're too strong to stop, because stopping feels like quitting. But think about it. What if the greatest act of strength isn't to push harder, but to pause consciously? What if peace isn't the opposite of ambition, but its highest form? You can't control your drive until you control your stillness. You can't own success until success no longer owns you. Every empire built on chaos eventually collapses from within, not because of enemies, but because its foundation was never calm. The Sigma mind understands that clarity is power, and without clarity, ambition becomes noise. And noise drowns out everything: intuition, gratitude, even joy. Here's the tragedy. The world loves your chaos. It rewards your burnout. It praises your sleeplessness. They see your grind and call it glory. They turn your suffering into slogans. No days off. Sleep is for the weak. Keep pushing. But no one tells you what happens when you actually reach the top and realize the view isn't what you imagined. You thought success would fill you, but it only made the emptiness louder. You thought recognition would heal the wound, but it just covered it with gold. People cheer for your achievements, but they never see the cracks beneath the smile. You can fake confidence for the world, but you can't fake peace for yourself. Every time you post your victories, a small part of you whispers, "Will they still care when I stop winning?" That's not motivation anymore. That's dependency. You become addicted to external approval. You become a puppet to your own image. The applause becomes your drug, and every time it fades, you crave another hit. That's the dark side of motivation. It makes you believe your worth depends on your next move. But ask yourself, what if real power comes from being unshaken, not unstoppable? What if being unbothered by the outcome is the ultimate form of control? So here's the question that separates the obsessed and enlightened. Are you chasing success or running from silence? Because there's a difference. One is driven by purpose, the other by fear. One brings clarity, the other chaos. It's easy to confuse motion with meaning, progress with peace. But deep down, you know, something's off. You can feel it when you finally sit alone, and the quiet feels uncomfortable. That's not ambition anymore, that's addiction. And addiction, no matter how noble it looks, always leads to emptiness. But what if I told you there's a way to win differently, to have both fire and calm, to move with intent, not impulse, to build without breaking? Because the strongest men aren't the ones who conquer others. They're the ones who conquer themselves. And that's exactly where we're going next. 2. When ambition turns from a weapon into a wound, there's a moment, often invisible, almost poetic, when ambition stops being a tool and starts becoming a wound. It doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly, disguised as progress. You're still pushing forward, still climbing, still chasing. From the outside, everything looks perfect: momentum, success, discipline. But inside, something shifts. You no longer chase your goals for joy or meaning. You chase them because you're afraid of what will happen if you stop. That's when ambition transforms from power into poison. What was once your armor starts cutting into your skin. Every achievement feels less satisfying than the last. Every victory feels hollow, like a song you've heard too many times, but can't stop playing because silence feels worse. You begin to sense that something deep within you is bleeding, but you can't locate where or why. You start to realize ambition can be deceptive. It pretends to give you control when in truth, it takes it away. You begin sacrificing more than you ever planned. Your health, your relationships, your sense of peace. And yet it's never enough. The higher you climb, the more fragile your confidence becomes. Because now your entire identity depends on winning. The day you fail, everything you built inside collapses like a house of glass. That's when you understand the cruel paradox of ambition. It convinces you that you're chasing greatness, when in reality, you're running from your own insecurity. You're not chasing success, you're escaping fear. You want validation, not victory. You want to feel worthy, not wealthy. And the more you chase worth in external things, the further you drift from the truth. That worth was always supposed to come from within. You see it in powerful men, in driven leaders, in high performers who look invincible, until the cracks begin to show. The burnout, the breakdowns, the quiet emotional collapse that happens behind closed doors. They'll tell you they're fine, that it's just stress, that they'll rest after this project, this deal, this win. But it never ends, because the deeper wound isn't exhaustion, it's disconnection. Disconnection from purpose, from self, from stillness. Ambition, when poisoned, doesn't just tire you, it empties you. It turns life into a constant negotiation between what you want and what you're losing. You start living for someday I'll rest, someday I'll be happy, someday I'll slow down. But someday never comes, because the mind addicted to motion doesn't know how to be still. And that's where ambition becomes dangerous. Not because it pushes you too hard, but because it blinds you to what truly matters. You start mistaking intensity for importance. You start believing your value lies in the next result, the next win, the next approval. You tell yourself this is the price of greatness. But deep down, you wonder, what if greatness doesn't require suffering? What if the real strength isn't in pushing harder, but in knowing when to let go? Because no amount of achievement will heal a spirit that's been taught it's never enough. You can't outwork emptiness. You can't hustle your way to wholeness. Every step forward driven by fear only takes you further from peace. The world glorifies the grind, but the truth is, endless ambition without balance doesn't create leaders, it creates ghosts. But the irony, the ones who suffer from this wound the most, are often the ones who look the calmest. They've mastered composure. They smile when praised. They speak with confidence. They move with purpose. But behind those calm eyes is a storm of self-doubt, constantly whispering, what if I lose it all? You see, when ambition becomes your identity, failure becomes death. You stop taking risks that don't guarantee success. You stop experimenting, dreaming, resting. You start surviving your own drive. That's the wound ambition leaves. A life where everything looks perfect, but nothing feels alive. And yet, the tragedy is, most people won't even realize it until it's too late. Until they won everything the world said they should want, and lost everything their soul quietly begged them to keep. So the question remains, how do you stop ambition from becoming your wound? How do you hold the fire without letting it burn you alive? Maybe it begins with awareness. Maybe it begins with slowing down long enough to ask, why am I chasing this? What am I afraid will happen if I don't? Because when you trace your ambition back to its source, you'll often find not power, but pain. Pain from a time you were overlooked, underestimated, or ignored. Pain from wanting to prove something, not to others, but to yourself. But here's the truth few people tell you. Healing that wound doesn't make you weaker. It makes you unstoppable. Because once you stop chasing from fear, you start creating from freedom. And freedom, not ambition, is what makes a man truly powerful. And yet, even after realizing this, few truly change. Why? Because the next illusion begins. The illusion that control equals safety. That the only way to survive in a chaotic world is to dominate it. But control, too, has its price. 3. The illusion of control when certainty becomes a cage. Control. It sounds powerful, doesn't it? It feels like strength, like having your hands firmly wrapped around the steering wheel of life. You wake up early, plan every move, anticipate every outcome. You master your routines, your reactions, your surroundings. And for a while, it works. You feel untouchable, a man of order in a world of chaos. But beneath that calm precision, something fragile begins to grow. You start to realize that control isn't freedom. It's dependence disguised as discipline. Because the moment something doesn't go your way, the illusion shatters. And in that silence between expectation and reality, fear rushes in. The fear of losing grip. The fear of uncertainty. The fear that without control, everything, including you, might fall apart. We live in a culture that worships control. We glorify planners, perfectionists, strategists, the people who seem to have everything figured out. But control is a seductive trap. It convinces you that predictability is peace, when in truth, it's just confinement. You stop taking chances, not because you're lazy, but because you're terrified of chaos. You say no to opportunities that feel uncertain, people who challenge you, paths that aren't guaranteed. You call it standards. You call it discipline. But sometimes, it's just fear wearing a suit. The world outside your plans becomes the enemy. Every unpredictability feels like a threat. Yet ironically, life's most powerful moments, love, growth, transformation, live only in uncertainty. You can't schedule spontaneity. You can't control inspiration. You can't structure the magic that changes your life. And that's where most ambitious souls quietly suffocate. They become prisoners of their own systems. Every day is efficient, but empty. Every achievement feels safe, but soulless. You begin to lose the very spark that made you ambitious in the first place. Curiosity. That childlike wonder that once made you explore, take risks, and believe in something beyond logic. You become a machine dressed as a man. Predictable, reliable, controlled. And the more you tighten your grip, the more life slips through your fingers. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Control doesn't protect you from pain. It only isolates you from growth. The very chaos you fear is the same force that shapes greatness. The most powerful men in history weren't the ones who avoided uncertainty. They were the ones who walked straight into it and adapted. Think of the entrepreneur who risked everything on an idea that failed 10 times before it worked. The artist who destroyed his own masterpiece just to see what beauty could be born from imperfection. The strategist who learned that sometimes surrendering to uncertainty brings more wisdom than 1,000 careful plans. Control didn't define them. Courage did. The courage to stand in the storm and trust their instincts when logic failed. The courage to fall without fearing the fall itself. That's the difference between those who survive and those who evolve. Because life isn't meant to be mastered. It's meant to be met. Each moment, unpredictable and alive, demands not control but presence. Yet most people can't bear that truth. They cling to their routines, their calendars, their carefully curated paths, mistaking stability for strength. But deep down, they know something's missing. The spark, the unpredictability, the thrill of not knowing what tomorrow might bring. It's that tension between safety and aliveness that defines a human experience. You can build the perfect system, but if your soul feels caged, what's the point? True power isn't in controlling life. It's in mastering your response to it. It's in being grounded enough to let go. Because when you finally stop trying to control every outcome, something incredible happens. Life starts moving with you, not against you. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Once you loosen your grip on control, you begin to notice something deeper. The subtle voice beneath your thoughts, the quiet intuition that's always been guiding you. You start to sense that there's a pattern behind the chaos, not one you can command, but one you can align with. And this realization opens a door to something far more profound than control, awareness, the power to see clearly, even when nothing makes sense, the strength to remain calm in uncertainty, the wisdom to act not from panic, but from understanding. That's not control, that's mastery. And yet, there's still one more layer to uncover, the emotional storm that control tries to silence. Because behind every obsession with certainty lies something more human and far more dangerous. The fear of vulnerability, the fear of feeling too deeply, caring too much, being seen as fragile in a world that worships power. But vulnerability isn't weakness. It's truth in motion. And the inability to face it, that's the beginning of inner collapse. For the emotional burnout, when strength becomes suppression, there's a kind of exhaustion that no sleep can fix. It's not in your body, it's in your soul. The kind of fatigue that comes from pretending to be fine for too long. You walk through life composed, controlled, unshaken. People admire your calm. They call you strong, disciplined, stoic. They have no idea that behind that unbothered face lies a storm of emotions you've locked away so tightly that even you can't feel them anymore. You've mistaken silence for peace, numbness for strength, and detachment for power. But real strength was never about shutting down your emotions. It was about learning how to carry them without letting them consume you. The problem is, when you keep suppressing what you feel, your emotions don't disappear. They just go quiet, waiting until one day they come back with interest. You start to feel it in small ways at first. The lack of joy in the things that once excited you. The emptiness in the middle of a win. The strange hollowness that lingers even after people praise you. You tell yourself you're just tired, just busy, just distracted. But deep down, you know it's something else. You built your life like a fortress, guarded by discipline and intellect. But now the walls are closing in. The very armor that once protected you has become your cage. Because the truth is, emotional suppression isn't control. It's fear. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of being seen as weak. Fear of admitting that even the strongest men can bleed inside. But pretending not to feel doesn't make you strong. It makes you disconnected. And disconnection, over time, turns you into a ghost of yourself. Functioning, achieving, performing, but no longer living. You see, emotional burnout doesn't announce itself with breakdowns. It shows up quietly, through numbness, indifference, a slow fading of color from your world. You start moving on autopilot, doing what's expected, saying what's right, keeping it all together. On the surface, you're calm. But inside, you're slowly drowning in everything you refuse to feel. You've learned to process pain through productivity, to bury emotion under achievement. But no amount of success can fill the void left by unfelt emotion. Because emotions aren't enemies to conquer. They're signals to listen to. Anger, sadness, fear, they're not weaknesses. They're your body's way of telling you something's wrong. When you silence them long enough, they stop whispering and start screaming through burnout, through apathy, through sudden loss of purpose. And that's the paradox of modern strength. The world tells you to be unshakable, to stay calm, think logically, never let emotions interfere. But emotions are not interruptions to logic, they inform it. They are the compass guiding your instincts, the energy behind your intuition. Suppressing them doesn't make you more focused, it makes you blind. Blind to your own limits, your own needs, your own humanity. The Sigma path, the true inner mastery, isn't about emotional silence. It's about emotional fluency. It's the ability to stand in the middle of chaos, feel everything fully, and still choose your direction with clarity. Not because you're cold, but because you're conscious. But here's where the real tragedy lies. Emotional burnout doesn't just cost you your peace. It costs you connection. The people around you stop feeling close because you've built emotional walls so high no one can reach you. You stop trusting, stop sharing, stop letting anyone in because you convince yourself solitude is safety. But isolation isn't peace. It's slow emotional erosion. You can't connect deeply with others if you've disconnected from yourself. And the longer you suppress, the harder it becomes to remember what genuine emotion even feels like. You wake up one day and realize you built a life so controlled, so polished, so perfect that it no longer feels real. Yet, in that very realization, there lies your awakening. Because burnout at its core is your soul begging you to stop pretending. It's your body reminding you that control without connection is emptiness. The path forward isn't about breaking down. It's about breaking open, letting yourself feel again. Cry if you must, rage if you need to, pause if you're lost. But whatever you do, don't go numb. Because numbness may protect you from pain, but it also steals your joy, your empathy, your spark. True strength is not the absence of emotion. It's the ability to feel deeply and remain centered through it. That's how the mind stays sharp and the soul stays alive. But once you face your emotions, once you allow yourself to feel again, a new challenge begins. A subtler, quieter danger that hides behind self-improvement itself. The addiction to constant growth. Because after pain comes awareness. And after awareness comes hunger. The hunger to evolve endlessly. But when does evolution become escape? When does becoming better turn into running from who you are right now? 5. The growth trap, when self-improvement becomes self-escape. There's a moment in every self-aware person's journey when growth stops feeling like progress and starts feeling like pressure. You wake up every day wanting to be better, smarter, calmer, more productive, more successful. You watch videos, read books, chase habits, track routines, and still, something inside you feels off. You start measuring your worth by how much you've evolved. You treat every flaw like a battle to be won, every weakness like an enemy to destroy. And somewhere in that relentless pursuit of better, you lose sight of the person you already are. Growth becomes a race with no finish line, a chase of perfection that never arrives. You're not running toward fulfillment anymore. You're running from inadequacy. And the more you chase, the further peace runs from you. You see, the trap of self-improvement is that it disguises itself as enlightenment. It feels noble, becoming a better version of yourself, learning, evolving. But deep down, it often hides fear, the fear that who you are now is enough. You stop resting, because rest feels like regression. You stop celebrating small wins, because there's always a higher goal waiting. You stop being present, because the future version of you is always louder, always more demanding. You keep telling yourself, once I fix this, once I achieve that, once I become that version of me, then I'll be happy. But the truth is brutal. That version never arrives. Because the moment you reach it, your mind creates another one and the chase begins again. You build a staircase to nowhere, climbing endlessly toward peace that was always right beneath your feet. And yet, society applauds it. The world romanticizes the grind, glorifies the hustle, idolizes the constant need to upgrade. You become addicted to becoming. Every video you watch, every book you read, every quote you save tells you the same thing. Be more, do more, achieve more. But no one tells you how to be still. No one teaches you how to just exist without needing to evolve. You start to believe that stillness is stagnation, that peace is laziness. But peace isn't the end of growth. It's a foundation of it. Because true evolution doesn't come from running faster. It comes from seeing clearer. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to be more. Think about it. What if all the self-improvement in the world means nothing if it costs you your contentment? What if the ultimate level of growth isn't about adding more, but letting go of the need to constantly change? Because the truth is, every version of you, the broken one, the healing one, the evolving one, is worthy of love. You can't grow from shame. You can't build strength from self-rejection. The moment you start growing to escape yourself instead of understanding yourself, you've lost the essence of transformation. Real growth doesn't demand you to be unrecognizable. It teaches you to be unapologetically whole. And wholeness isn't something you chase. It's something you remember. But this trap runs deeper. Because even when you realize it, part of you resists stopping. You've tied your identity to your evolution. If you're not improving, who are you? You feel guilty resting, uneasy being still. You mistake discomfort for laziness, when sometimes it's your soul begging for presence. The Sigma mindset, true, grounded mastery, isn't about endless self-upgrades. It's about knowing when to pause, when to breathe, when to let the moment teach you, instead of always trying to teach yourself. It's about finding power not in constant movement, but in deep awareness. That's where peace lives, not in perfection, but in perspective. And here's the quiet truth that no motivational book will tell you. You don't need to constantly evolve to be worthy of peace. You don't have to fix everything to be valuable. You don't need to constantly reinvent yourself to stay relevant. Sometimes, growth is simply learning to exist fully in who you already are, to look at your flaws without judgment, your past without shame, and your present without urgency. That's not stagnation. That's spiritual maturity. Because when you stop running, you finally start seeing. You realize that peace and progress were never opposites. They were partners all along. But once that understanding settles in, something new begins to awaken. Something quieter, subtler, but far more powerful. You start to see that life itself has its own rhythm, a timing that unfolds beyond your control, beyond your ambition, beyond your plans. And when you learn to align with it instead of fight it, that's when everything begins to flow. Because not every moment is meant for movement. Some are meant for patience, for trust, for waiting. And in that stillness, you discover the rarest wisdom of all. And that's where the tragedy of modern ambition begins, not in failure, but in the silent moments between success and satisfaction. You see, ambition starts as a whisper, a quiet fire that tells you can be more. It pushes you to chase what others won't, to wake up when the world still sleeps, to grind when others rest. And at first it feels pure, like clarity, like purpose. But somewhere along the way, it changes its voice. That whisper becomes demand. That quiet flame becomes a wildfire. And before you even realize it, you're no longer chasing your dream. You're running from your own fear of being enough. You don't stop because you love it. You stop only when you collapse. Because the moment ambition stops feeling like passion and starts feeling like survival, that's when it becomes dangerous. But ambition doesn't destroy you all at once. It's subtle. It takes piece after piece. Your sleep, your laughter, your ability to feel joy without reason. It convinces you that rest is weakness, that love is a distraction, that peace is for those who quit too soon. You begin to measure your worth not by how content you feel, but by how exhausted you are, and the world praises you for it. They call you driven, focused, disciplined. But behind those words, there's a quiet truth no one dares to speak. You're burning and they're applauding the flames. And maybe that's why ambition feels addictive, because the pain it brings is disguised as progress. And yet, beneath all the chaos, there's a part of you that still remembers the beginning, the part that used to dream without fear, that used to imagine success without guilt. That version of you still exists, but it's buried under the noise. Every now and then you feel it in the silence between achievements, in the moments when the applause fades and you're left with your thoughts. That's when the real question rises. What if success isn't what you think it is? What if you've been chasing light only to find it blinds you more than it guides you? What if ambition was never about becoming more, but remembering who you already were before the world told you to run? Because the dark side of motivation isn't the failure it leads to. It's the emptiness it hides behind success. It's when you forget why you started and all that's left is the chase itself. But here's where things start to shift. Because once you see that darkness for what it is, once you recognize the cost of endless pursuit, you start to wonder, is there a way to win without losing yourself? Can ambition coexist with peace? That's where we move next, into the second layer of this truth, where drive meets self-awareness, where we explore how success can heal instead of hollow. But before we step there, pause. Feel that quiet space inside you right now. That's the line between ambition and destruction. And that's exactly where the next story begins. And so, as we reach the end of this chapter, the dark side of motivation, take a moment to just breathe. Let the noise settle. Let the echoes of everything you've chased fall silent for a while. You spent years, maybe decades, running toward dreams, goals, validation, purpose. You fought battles that no one clapped for, sacrificed peace in name of progress, and built a version of yourself strong enough to survive anything except stillness. But here, right now, in this quiet moment between what was and what's next, you finally get to stop running. Because understanding the darkness behind motivation isn't weakness, it's awakening. It's the moment you stop confusing movement with meaning. Maybe you realize that the loudest applause often comes when you're most disconnected from yourself. That the compliments don't heal, the milestones don't satisfy, and the grind doesn't bring peace. It only feeds a silence you've been trying to escape. You thought ambition would free you, but it built a different kind of cage, one lined with achievements, but empty of emotion. You've been holding the world in your hands, but somehow it never felt like enough. And now, as that truth sinks in, you finally understand there was never a finish line. There was only the illusion of one. But this realization isn't the end of your journey. It's the turning point. Because the strongest people aren't those who keep pushing no matter what. They're the ones brave enough to pause, to question, to look themselves in the mirror and say, maybe I don't need more. Maybe I just need to feel whole again. That's not surrender. That's mastery. The moment you stop being controlled by your need to prove something, you gain control over everything. That's when ambition transforms from something that consumes you into something that serves you, from a storm into still water, from chaos into power. And when you reach that space, when you stop letting the world rush you, something profound happens. Life starts revealing its rhythm. You begin to notice that everything meaningful in your life didn't come from force. It came from timing. The right people, the right chances, the right chapters. They all appeared not when you chased harder, but when you were ready. You begin to see that patience isn't the opposite of ambition. It's its evolution. Because those who understand timing win silently. They don't rush, they prepare. They don't react, they observe. They know that every delay, every detour, every pause has purpose. And that, my friend, is where we'll meet again in the next chapter of this journey. In a place where calm replaces chaos and control replaces urgency. Where we dive deeper into the psychology of timing. Why patience wins more than talent. Because in a world that glorifies speed, few understand stillness. But those who do rule quietly. So as the music fades and this reflection comes to a close, take a moment tonight. Not to plan your next move, but to feel your next breath. Let go of the need to rush. You're not falling behind. You're just sinking with a different kind of power. And maybe that's the real secret. The people who look unstoppable aren't the ones who move the fastest. They're the ones who move when it matters. So slow down. Feel that calm. Because from here on, every decision, every move, every step will come from alignment, not fear. And when you live like that, you no longer chase peace. You become it.